Thanks for having us present. We're from Georgetown University and our repository is called Digital Georgetown. So our presentation is about the migration that we recently completed this year. So the team that worked on this is Jason Brock, Senior Systems Engineer, Suzanne Chase, Head of Digital Scholarship and Technology Services, which is the department we're in, Steve Fernie, Web Services Coordinator, myself, Digital Repository and Preservation Librarian, Ted Mallison, Digital Services Specialist, and Scott Tyson, Senior Software Developer. And Jason is going to start talking about some of the background of this project.
Thanks, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. As Rachel said, I'm going to start things off by providing a little bit of background and timeline regarding the digital repository system here at Georgetown, which we call Digital Georgetown, and the ensuing platform migration project. So Digital Georgetown was first established in 2004 as part of the Georgetown University Library's commitment to long-term digital preservation and access to our scholarly works, digital projects, and archival collections. Since 2011, the repository has been locally hosted and managed on the DSpace platform in combination with a number of significant custom enhancements that our own development team had done. And we started on DSpace version 1.7 way back when and eventually migrated up all the way through version 6. And while DSpace served us well for many years, by 2019, it became clear that our needs and the needs of our users had evolved. So in that same year, library leadership charged a digital repository task force with evaluating the landscape of available repository platforms. And after a period of research and consultation, the task force recommended that we move away from DSpace and to a new platform. The Samvera software framework emerged as the right fit for us, with its emphasis on community-driven development, modularity, and scalability. And then ultimately, we decided on implementing Hyku, mainly for its advanced user and group management, Bulkrax integration, and SSO integration. It had some features already built into it that we were keen to take advantage of. It also enabled us to support a separate tenant for our law library collections, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. So by late 2022, we were able to formally launch the migration project. And in spring of 2023, the development team began work in earnest on a customized Hyku app. And it was obviously designed to meet our specific requirements for managing and showcasing our digital collections. In the fall of 2024, we started the content migration process and soft launched the site, which allowed us to test the new infrastructure that we had built out in Google Cloud platform, and test out the migration workflow as well. We then gathered feedback from key stakeholders and overall went through this process to ensure that the collections and items were moving smoothly into the new environment. We successfully migrated 30,723 items into 190 total collections, which we were able to consolidate down from 243 collections that we had in our DSpace environment. And with that background in mind, Rachel will now talk more about what we were trying to accomplish with this migration. So over to you, Rachel.
Great, thank you. So some of the goals were kind of covered, I think, like in the, when we talked about why we were migrating in the first place. But so we wanted to provide a more flexible, scalable, and interoperable digital repository system that can be easily adapted to meet our user needs and requirements. One way that Hyku met this goal is through the work types and flexible metadata profiles. We wanted to provide our community with a robust platform for curating and hosting digital works and scholarship. Part of this goal is met through the more intuitive submission process that exists in Hyku. We wanted to enhance archival and special digital collections with integrated feature-rich content viewers, which Scott will talk about during his portion of the presentation. We wanted to leverage cloud computing infrastructure and manage storage and application servers in Google Cloud Platform. Georgetown University is moving to a cloud-only institution, so this was important to us. Segment law library content from main campus collections through tenancy. This is another way Hyku is a good fit for us, as historically the law library content has been managed separately from the main campus material. And we wanted to join this robust open source community, which Samvera has been a great supporter of, and definitely was lacking a bit in the DSpace environment. And as Jason mentioned, we did our beta launch in November of 2024, and we've finished the migration of the main tenant material, and Ted will talk a little bit about our migration process as well as the work types that we've used.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about our process that we actually went through to remediate our metadata and then actually do the migration. So Hyku's work type feature enables customized metadata profiles. So we created 4 of these to cover our specific needs. Those are digital special collections, faculty scholarship, electronic theses and dissertations, and then a 4th to cover the collections of the law library. The work types allowed us to set required fields for each of these broad categories, and they also provided us a framework for retooling our entire metadata schema. Since Hyku allows for flexible, highly extensible metadata, we took advantage of the migration to redevelop our schema into something that more adequately fit a modern, non-hierarchical repository. The metadata had gotten quite evolved and complex in our DSpace instance over a decade. So we worked to improve consistency and clarity in the metadata, and that include merging certain elements to reduce redundancy. So Scott Tyson, our software developer, created a Google Apps script to automate some of our remediation tasks, including crosswalking terms from our DSpace repositories, customized Dublin core to Hyku's front-facing user-friendly vocabulary, and merging or removing elements that we no longer needed. Rachel and I then went through the metadata for each individual collection to further clean and refine it before finally staging a finished CSV for migration. For each collection, the metadata CSV and the files were staged on cloud servers, and we used Bulkrax to perform the actual migration using the CSV parser with the specify and output path on the server import method. We kept track of our progress using a shared Google Sheet. We eliminated several metadata-only collections and were able to reduce the overall number of collections by flattening the hierarchical structure that we had in DSpace in a way that is more logical for digital repositories, relying more on the metadata to connect related materials. So now I will turn it over to Scott.
Great, thanks so much, Ted. So I'll just talk a little bit about some customizations we made to the catalog to improve the discovery experience. So we made a series of styles changes according to Georgetown's visual identity guidelines. These are across the site, but shown here in the catalog. And we also tried to tailor the discovery experience to include the metadata most relevant to our community in the search results. And that took a little bit of testing and refinement. And we added a title sort option, which doesn't come with a Hyku 5.1, but it has been widely implemented in the Samvera community. So it was helpful to plug that in. And we included a date created facet utilizing the blacklight range limit gem, and also tacked on some JavaScripts to validate inputted dates. Right, next slide, please. Yeah, so we are primarily using the viewers that come with Hyku, including Universal Viewer and PDF.js. For most of our PDF works in DSpace, PDFs were only viewable when downloaded, so PDF.js has been a big improvement over that functionality. Most of our video files are on the ShareStream video platform currently, and rather than migrate all of our video files in this early stage, we're using an iframe to make those ShareStream videos available in Digital Georgetown, as shown in the top right. And we did upgrade to PDF.js, or sorry, PDF.js 4.6, which has improved PDF flow times. Although many of our works have PDFs over 200 megabytes, so load times degrade significantly around that size still. So we're looking to improve those load times and continue to upgrade PDF.js. We've been enjoying the search term highlighting in PDF.js, shown in the image in the bottom right, and that comes with Hyku. And before I hand it over to Steve to talk about our work on accessibility, I did want to thank everyone at SoftServe and Notch8 for their Hyku support and other help throughout our migration. It's really been essential to the success of this project. So thanks to all of those folks.
Great, thanks, Scott. As the web coordinator, I'm responsible for accessibility, and here at Georgetown, all of our new sites are required to meet WCAG 2.1 AA compliance before they're permitted to launch on a georgetown.edu domain. So this was a fair amount of work for us. Compliance is enforced through both a pre-launch automated crawl through Site Improve, and then the University Central Web Services accessibility team also conducts a manual review with screen readers and making sure that things are okay when the windows resize, when text is zoomed, and also when people navigate only through a keyboard and without a mouse. We did discover pleasantly that out-of-the-box Hyku is far more accessible than our version of DSpace. We had sort of been, our DSpace instance predated the university's accessibility policy, so it was sort of grandfathered in, understanding that it would be replaced at some point and that we would be in line with the new accessibility policy. So we found that most of our remediation was actually focused on the search result pages, but we also discovered some issues with the neutral repository homepage theme and the version of Universal Viewer that we were using. Some of those Universal Viewer issues were things that we know will be solved in a future version of Universal Viewer that we're looking forward to implementing. But we've also reported another issue to the development team there in the hope that that'll be resolved in the future. So next slide. So this is just broadly, Scott already talked a little bit about the visual identity guidelines, but moving from DSpace, our previous site on the left, you can see it's, I'll say utilitarian and functional, but it's very text heavy. And the overall site you can see on the right is more collection forward and more image forward. And if you go ahead, Rachel, and so again, this is a little closer view of the previous DSpace homepage. You can see our old library logo on there. We've got some old visual identity on there as well. And now the new site is in line with our visual identity, and everyone seems to think it looks a lot prettier, which is always nice to hear. And one more slide. So we also made some modifications to the collection landing page. Specifically, rather than going with a large banner image on the collection page, we've got collection thumbnails for each collection, which appear throughout Hyku and give each collection sort of a distinctive identity. We've also eliminated the items appearing in here, but there's a little green button, which is just off to the bottom of the screen, which lets you browse those items in the collection. So yeah, the idea was that people who wound up on this page would probably click through and see those items, but we wanted to sort of keep that fairly streamlined. And then I will turn it over to Rachel.
Yeah, so It's always helpful, I think, after going through something like this to reflect on what went well and how you might do things differently. So some of our takeaways: lead with requirements and solicit needs. So a main criteria for our new Hyku-based repository was that it offered at least the most valuable features that our DSpace repository had. While this remained an important goal throughout customization and migration, the enhancements we made required that at times we set aside our legacy solutions and anticipated new solutions or solicited feedback from people outside of our department. So in some cases, kind of starting from scratch on certain things. So yeah, this kind of challenged our assumptions about how our visitors and colleagues were engaging with the repository by getting actually having conversations about it instead of relying on our assumptions, since especially because Digital Georgetown is such an old site at this point. So know your content, but be prepared for surprises. Our repository is for the archival and special digital collections, as well as our institutional material. I'm just mentioning that because I know a lot of us in the Samberg community are organized in various different ways. But having been on the same repository for over 10 years, there were certain projects that were kind of shoehorned in, or decisions that were made at the time that we might have done differently today. So just kind of having a real understanding of the content before beginning migration is very important. But even with that, you still might come across some surprises. For example, Ted and I didn't realize that there were some video files that were accompanying the PDFs that were part of the electronic theses and dissertations, which ended up adding a lot of time to our Bulkrax migration. So we kind of had to relook at how we were doing things and kind of make sure none of those video files were there when doing the migration. Good enough doesn't always work. That was a big lesson in this experience. So the migration and customization required that we coordinate work streams related to the user experience, the migration pipeline, and validation of the content. It was helpful to embrace temporary solutions that eased more important or timely work and to enhance those solutions over time. But some issues were too big to move forward without fixing properly. For example, as we mentioned, we changed the hierarchy quite a bit in the from DSpace to Hyku, and one of the things we were relying on to improve the in order to flatten the structure was the source field, which wasn't working properly at first. And so rather than finding some kind of workaround, we paused the migration work to get that working before going forward. So obviously we're taking our lessons learned with us going forward, but some of the immediate next steps are, we are in the middle of the Law Center Library migration. So we're hoping to finish that sometime this summer. At some point, the DSpace servers will be decommissioned, which means that the new handles will then become functional, which is exciting because we have started adding new works to Hyku. Ted and I are going to continue to clean up metadata, and the development team will continue to fix bugs and update features. And we're going to continue to get feedback from our patrons and colleagues. So with that, we'd like to open it up for a few questions if there's time.
Thanks, Rachel, and everyone. And congratulations on all your hard work.